Yo, can you imagine waking up one morning and bam, every single world leader is gone? Like poof, no more presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, nobody. That's the kind of news that would make you spit out your coffee, right? Well, that's the world we're talking about today. A world without leaders. News channels would be blowing up, social media. Forget about it, total meltdown. From the White House to the Kremlin, Buckingham Palace to the Forbidden City, silence. It'd be eerie, man. This isn't some Hollywood movie. This is a global crisis of unprecedented proportions. Imagine the confusion, the fear. People would be asking, what happens now? Nobody has the answer. It'd be total chaos. And in that chaos, the future of the world hangs in the balance. This is some real end of the world as we know it stuff. Okay, so the leaders are gone. What happens next? Well, every country has some kind of plan, right? Like a line of succession, someone to step up if the big guy kicks the bucket. Problem is, this isn't just one guy, it's everyone, all at once. Think about the US. The vice president is usually next in line, but what if something took out the whole cabinet? Suddenly you're talking about some low-level official in line for the most powerful job in the world. And it's the same story everywhere. Chaos in the ranks, countries scrambling to figure out who's in charge. Military leaders might step in, promising stability, but that could easily turn into a power grab, right? And who's to say they even know how to run a country, let alone the whole world? It's a recipe for disaster. The world is staring into the abyss, holding its breath. This is uncharted territory, folks, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Let's talk money, people, because when the world freaks out, the markets freak out even harder. We're talking stock market crashes, currencies going haywire, the whole financial system on the verge of collapse. Remember 2008? Yeah, this would be way worse. Businesses wouldn't know whether to hire or fire, invest or shut down. Trade between countries? Forget about it. The global economy is built on trust and agreements, and right now there's zero trust and even less agreement. The rich might weather the storm, but for everyday folks, it'd be a nightmare. Jobs lost, savings wiped out, the cost of everything skyrocketing. We're talking about a global recession, maybe even a depression. The scary part? This economic chaos would only make everything else worse. More instability, more conflict, more reasons for the world to spiral out of control. It's a vicious cycle, and it's just getting started. You know what happens when people are scared and desperate? Things get real ugly, real fast. We're talking riots, looting, crime going through the roof, the thin veneer of civilization gone. Imagine entire cities on lockdown, the military patrolling the streets, people fighting over food and water, desperate to protect their families. It wouldn't be pretty. This isn't some dystopian fiction. This is what happens when society breaks down. In some places, communities might band together, helping each other out, but in others, it'd be survival of the fittest, every man for himself. The rule of law would crumble, replaced by fear and uncertainty. And the worst part, this chaos would only deepen the power vacuum, making it easier for those with bad intentions to exploit the situation. Buckle up, folks, because things are about to get a whole lot worse. Section 5, Power Vacuum, a breeding ground for conflict. Here's the thing about a power vacuum. It never stays empty for long. Someone is always waiting in the wings, ready to seize control. And when you've got a whole world up for grabs, that's when things get really dangerous. Think about it. Countries with long-standing rivalries, suddenly without the leaders who kept a lid on things. Terrorist organizations sensing an opportunity to strike. Warlords and dictators just waiting for their chance to grab some power. You could see wars erupt overnight, borders redrawn in blood. The international order, already fragile, would shatter completely. It'd be a free-for-all, with the most ruthless and powerful rising to the top. And the scariest part, this wouldn't be some small-scale conflict. We're talking about the potential for another world war, this time with even higher stakes. Because when the entire world is at play, there's no telling how far people will go to win. Section 6. Global Guardians, the UN and international response. All right, so the world is falling apart. Is there any hope? Well, there's this little organization called the United Nations. You might have heard of it. They're supposed to be all about peace and cooperation and all that jazz. But can they really do anything in a situation like this? Without leaders to represent their countries, the UN would be in a tough spot. But they'd still be the best hope for coordinating aid, mediating disputes, and trying to prevent things from spiraling even further out of control. The problem is, the UN only has as much power as its members allow it to have. And in a world where everyone is looking out for themselves, it's hard to say how effective they could really be. They'd be stretched thin, underfunded and facing impossible odds. But hey, even a glimmer of hope is better than nothing, right? The UN might not be able to fix everything, but they could at least try to hold the line to prevent the worst-case scenario from becoming reality. Section 7, picking up the pieces, rebuilding from the ashes. Let's say by some miracle, we manage to avoid total global meltdown. What then? Well, then comes the really hard part, rebuilding, picking up the pieces of a shattered world and trying to put them back together again. This wouldn't be a quick fix. We're talking about generations of work, rebuilding not just physical infrastructure, but trust, institutions, the very fabric of society. It would require a level of global cooperation and commitment that, frankly, we've never seen before. New leaders would emerge, hopefully wiser and more compassionate than those who came before. New systems of governance might arise, designed to prevent this kind of catastrophe from ever happening again. But the scars would remain. The trauma of that leaderless day would be etched into the collective memory of humanity. A stark reminder of how quickly civilization can crumble. Section 8. Scars of uncertainty, the psychological fallout, the psychological impact of a world suddenly without leaders. Deep, man, deep. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how people view the world, a loss of faith in the systems that govern our lives. It'd mess with your head for sure. Imagine the anxiety, the paranoia, the constant fear that it could all happen again, that the world could be plunged back into chaos at any moment. It'd be like living with a ticking time bomb in the back of your mind. People would become more distrustful, more isolated. The social fabric, already strained in many parts of the world, would fray even further. It'd be a recipe for mental health crises on a global scale. And the thing is, this psychological fallout wouldn't be limited to that one generation. It would be passed down, a legacy of fear and uncertainty inherited by our children and grandchildren. Section 9, dawn of a new era. Leadership in a transformed world, but hey, even in the darkest of times, there's got to be some light, right? After the initial shock and chaos, after the rebuilding begins, a new kind of world could emerge, a world where leadership isn't about power, but about service. Imagine leaders who are chosen not for their wealth or status, but for their wisdom, their compassion, their ability to unite people. Leaders who understand that true strength lies in cooperation, not domination. This new generation of leaders wouldn't be perfect, of course. They'd make mistakes, they'd face challenges, but they'd be driven by a different set of values, a different vision for the future, a vision where power is shared, where dialogue replaces conflict, and where the well-being of humanity is paramount. It's a hopeful thought, isn't it? That maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of all this chaos. Section 10. A world remade, reflections on a leaderless day. So there you have it. A glimpse into a world turned upside down, a world without leaders. It's a scary thought, no doubt, but it's also a reminder of how fragile our systems are, how easily they can be disrupted. It makes you think, doesn't it, about the kind of world we want to live in, the kind of leaders we want to follow. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that we can't take anything for granted, because in the end, the future is not predetermined. It's up to us to shape it, to create a world where something like this could never happen again. A world where leadership is about more than just power, but about responsibility, about service, about building a better future for all. That's the world I want to live in. What about you?